And I'm very pleased and honored to host this very special session. And actually, it's a series of programs talking about the 7 purposes of ISKCON. Today, actually, depends on how your calendar reads between India and the West. Today, or maybe yesterday, is actually the incorporation day. It's the 54th anniversary of ISKCON being incorporated. A very, very important day for ISKCON, all of our friends and devotees. It was in 1966 that Srila Prabhupada officially registered the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in his very small first temple, which was just a storefront on 26 2nd Avenue. He had a lawyer that had become a friend of the devotees came, and he stood up at the end of one of Prabhupada's talks, and Prabhupada said, please, what do you need us to do? And some of the devotees volunteered, and they signed some documents, and ISKCON was born. And within that document, Prabhupada specifically had named 7 purposes. So we're going to talk about those 7 purposes, particularly the 5th one, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But it's interesting for all of us to note and remember that from this very humble beginning, just 54 years ago, today there's more than 650 temples. There's about 100,000 initiated devotees that have come forward and taken spiritual vows and serious dedication as Vaishnavas. More than 520 million books have been distributed around the world in 80+ languages. More than 10 million people a year. And this is a real rough estimate. We don't have very good numbers on this, but at least 10 million people a year come now to worship at ISKCON temples. 3 billion plates of prasadam have been distributed around the world. And there's 1.2 million children, among many, many other things that we've achieved. And additionally, 1.2 million children are fed Krishna prasadam meals just in India every single day. So it's astounding. And it's all connected to this day, the foundation day of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So when Prabhupada founded ISKCON, he included these 7 purposes, and we're here to explore better understanding what Srila Prabhupada wanted, what was his purpose behind that, and what does it mean to us. So today, we're interviewing Svaha, Dasi, and Ambarish, and they're very well-known leaders in ISKCON, especially for their work leading and planning and designing and constructing and, of course, funding the TOVP, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, which is at ISKCON's international headquarters in Mayapur. So Ambarish Prabhu, Svaha, Dasi, thank you very, very much for being with us.
Thank you for that.
We're very, very pleased to have you here. Just a very brief introduction. Ambarish Prabhu has been a member of ISKCON since 1975. He actually met Srila Prabhupada in Dallas, Texas in 1974. He has a degree in art history. Maybe that was all fated to be, Ambarish Prabhu, that now you're creating perhaps the most glorious and beautiful structure, huge building in recent times from the entire planet. So maybe your art history was an important part of that. He certainly is ISKCON's leading philanthropist and has been so for decades. A lot of us know about his work with the TOVP, but he also, previous to that, those of us a little older, remember how the Detroit temple, when it was refurbished and beautified, a temple that Prabhupada personally visited and wanted to be purchased. So there's Detroit, before that Hawaii, later New Mayapur, ISKCON Foundation. I know from my work together with Ambarish, Children of Krishna, he's supported and done so much wonderful work for ISKCON. And he's networked with government officials. Most recently, we saw him meet with Mamata Banerjee, the chief minister of Bengal, and help lift any obstacles that were there for the Mayapur project going further. So done tremendous work. Svaha has been a member of ISKCON since 1981. The two of them were married in 1984 in Australia. Both of them, she is the mother of 2 wonderful daughters, and now they have a grandson. Lives near me in Washington, D.C. In addition to helping her husband with his projects, which really are their projects, we know that Prabhupada said the wife is the better half. So Ambarish, sometimes his name may be better known in some circles, although I know in other circles, Svaha's name is better known, so it balances it out. But definitely their projects. But in addition to that, she's noteworthy for her own contribution. She has a PhD in biochemistry, interesting balance in the household between an art history major and a biochemistry PhD holder. That must add a lot of spice to your conversations around the table. She's also artistic in her own right. She's the designer of the Vyasa-san for Srila Prabhupada in the TOVP, and now she's working on designing key elements of the Lord Nrsimhadev wing of the TOVP. So these are both very, very special people. They've been longtime devotees of ISKCON and Prabhupada. I know both of them personally. They're not just big names and people to write big checks and walk around in front of crowds. They're both very caring, very loving, very humble, and very dedicated members of ISKCON. So both of you, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us this morning in this celebration of the Incorporation Day. So Ambarish, if we can, let's start first with a question for you. This is the day that we're celebrating the incorporation. Prabhupada had his 7 purposes. Maybe I don't want to read them all. They're a little long. Although we encourage everybody, please look these up, print them, put them on your wall, put them on your, in your breakfast room where you see, oh, there they are. Great, fantastic. So I don't think I'll read all of them, but I'll highlight a little bit from each one, and then we'll go back to our questions for Ambarish. 1, Prabhupada had put in his incorporation to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large. I'll read the whole one on this. It's beautiful. To systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all peoples in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. Beautiful, beautiful expression. Second one just highlights to propagate a consciousness of Krishna. Prabhupada's 3rd purpose he gave for ISKCON, to bring the members of the society together and closer to Krishna, understanding that we're parts and parcels of the Godhead. 4, to teach and encourage the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting. 5, and we're going to come back to this one, to erect for the members and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. 6, bring the members together for teaching a more simple, more natural way of life. And 7, with the view towards achieving the aforementioned purposes, in other words, all of the rest of them, to help achieve those, to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. So Ambarish Prabhu, looking at all 7 of these, before we talk about number 5, erecting temples, which you're most known for and given so much effort and time for, how important really do you think is this day and this document, and especially these 7 purposes for devotees at large? As a senior Prabhupada disciple, how important are these to us?
Well, they're very important, and Srila Prabhupada was so future looking, that he could tell that he was going to have, a very large organization internationally. There'll be headquarters here and there and temples all over the place. So ISKCON is a preaching mission. And for any missionary movement, you need to have principles that you live by. Otherwise, as devotees, we could be just chanting underneath a tree or living very simply and not really worrying. But we need, Srila Prabhupada wanted to propagate the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu around the world. And in order to do that, you need an organization. And if you have an organization, then you need principles of the organization and a mission for the organization. Mm-hmm. So that to me, I think, is what is behind these purposes.
So you really see that these purposes are the mission. Prabhupada, in a succinct way, really was giving us what our mission needs to be.
Yes, yes. And there's a place in this document and in these missions for pretty much anybody, who wants to get involved.
What do you mean by that? There's a place for almost anybody. Expand.
Well, myself, I'm not much of a, book distributor. I'm not much of a direct preacher going out in the streets and talking to people. I do talk to people, business people and people that I know that I meet in India, and Srila Prabhupada wanted me to talk, to preach to people, in my general class or whatever. And so he wanted me to do that. So, but there's a place for me in purpose number 5. Otherwise, I'm not a book distributor. I'm not like a sadhu of any kind. And so, but, Krishna allows it, even if you can't, be directly involved in so many things in Krishna consciousness. He just says, work for me. So that's what Srila Prabhupada did. He just engaged me in doing work that he felt I could do. And, you know, it's been a great pleasure for me that I've gone from one project to another, and I'll spend the rest of my life probably working on these projects that he gave me. I mean, you know, we'll talk about this later, I think, about how he asked me directly to get involved with the TOVP. But I have other letters with other instructions, you know. So even if I was to finish the TOVP, I've got to move on to the next project, you know. So he gave me a lot to keep myself busy. And as Tamal Krishna said once, I think it was after Prabhupada's departure, what else is he going to do with all that money? So you know, Tamal was always straight to the point, you know. So anyway.
So you see in these 7 purposes, really there's principles that Prabhupada laid down, there's a mission, and I really like what you said, that there's room, there's a place for every one of us. Everyone can find something in here, maybe 2 or 3, but at least one.
Yeah.
Of the points that Prabhupada emphasized, we can find a place, we can find a purpose and something to dedicate ourselves to.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Svaha, some of your thoughts, you know, how do you feel these 7 purposes are important to ISKCON devotees? You've given your life to these. How would you share your insights on this?
Let me just begin by just Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Vani Prachari Nirvishesha Shunya Pascharya Desha Dharine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vachkal Rubhascha Kripasindu Devacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Thank you, Anuttama Prabhu, for giving us this opportunity on this very historic day to share our experiences and thoughts. And as our spiritual family is feeling the intense separation from His Holiness Bhakti Charuswami's recent departure, so we are keeping his disciples and everyone in our thoughts and prayers. And this is a very important day, so we appreciate that chose this day, because Bhakti Charuswami Maharaj, you know, he spent his lifetime in order to, you know, fulfill all those purposes that just enumerated, 7 purposes of ISKCON. So we just hope and pray that we can, you know, take part in some way in this Prabhupada's huge plan. Feel very fortunate to, you know, take part in it, and especially today. It's a very historic, memorable day for every devotee in ISKCON. So,
thank you for reminding us. Bhakti Chumaraj certainly was and will continue to be, by his inspiration and his Vani, really a beautiful example of someone who took Prabhupada's instructions, Prabhupada's mission, Prabhupada's 7 purposes, Prabhupada's ISKCON into his heart, and gave every ounce of strength that he had. And really, so many of us in so many different forms, we've been talking, we all know, everyone who's listening and the 3 of us here participating, been remembering Bhakti Chumaraj and meditating on how he truly embodied the principle that Prabhupada said, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate together. And I think, and you two really exemplify that as well. We'll talk more about that as we go. So thank you. Thank you for reminding us about Bhakti Chumaraj and his dedication to these same 7 purposes. Ambarish, Prabhu, you're most known, the 2 of you. I'm going to, you know, say Svaha and then Ambarish, go back and forth. But really, the 2 of you are very much a team. But you're particularly known for this principle 5. I'll read it again. To erect for the members and for society at large a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated, there it is on the screen, dedicated to the personality of Krishna. So how did this become so important to you?
Basically, it was my personal affection and, you know, for Srila Prabhupada, because when I first met him, and then subsequently afterwards, we would meet in Hawaii, and my mission, personal mission, was to make sure that I could do whatever I could to make him happy. And I think many of his disciples feel that way. And one of the ways that I was able to do this was to give him a place in Hawaii. They were looking for a new temple, and we bought a beautiful house. And gave it over to the devotees, and Srila Prabhupada loved it. You know, he loved to go there. He spent a lot of time there. He did a lot of his translating there. And I remember when I bought the house, it was quite a bit of money. And my father was not happy. And I told Srila Prabhupada, he said, "Oh, it's just like Prahlad Maharaj." I said, "Well, not quite like that, but anyway, he got a kick out of it, though." So then from there, we went to Devi and worked on that for several years. Unfortunately,
Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit. Srila Prabhupada departed 77. We had the major opening, which you were at, Prabhu, in 83, I think it was. And I think, as you mentioned, it was one of the biggest media events in the history of ISKCON so far.
It was.
Yeah. So that was a very nice thing. And then from there, I went into the ISKCON Foundation, and the idea there was to prepare the ground for the TOVP. And then from there, the TOVP just started to develop, and I can't claim that I'm following this this principle or this mission, number 5, that I'm doing it directly. But these are the things that Srila Prabhupada asked me to do, and he knew what I was capable of doing. And so he directly engaged me in doing these services for him. And that's been my focus all along, to try to make Srila Prabhupada happy with what I'm doing.
And for devotees that may not know, I'll just briefly mention one of the things that made the Detroit temple opening so historic was that the house that you purchased was the Fisher Mansion. It was a well-known mansion in Detroit that was owned by Lawrence Fisher, who was the famous body by Fisher. They made all the automobile bodies for General Motors at that time, and fabulously wealthy, and a big, in the 20s, roaring 20s, all of that. And then Henry Ford's great-grandson, Ambarish Prabhu, partnered with Lekha Shravanti, who was the daughter of Walter Reuther, who was I grew up in Detroit. I know this history very well. He was the most famous of the labor leaders of the United Auto Workers. So here we had management, the heir to the Ford family, one of the heirs, and you've got Lekha Shravanti, the daughter of the United Auto Workers, came together and gave money, and were there in this big event of opening this beautiful temple. It was just phenomenal interest in Detroit and Michigan and all around. How it was these two families who kind of like were on the opposite sides of the fence of the labor conflicts, if we can say. Man, it was beautiful. It was wonderful. People loved it. People in Detroit loved it. It was fantastic. It was really wonderful.
Thank you.
So tell me, how did it go from, you mentioned Hawaii and Detroit and something. How did this focus become so prevalent for you for the TOVP?
Well, after I took initiation 75, I went back to Detroit to help Govardhan, who was the temple president, develop Detroit, David Siddhan. And Srila Prabhupada wrote to me, and he was going to India, and he said, "Please come with me." So I went to Nairobi and then to India, and I stayed in Mumbai for a couple of months with Giriraj Swami. making life members for the new temple there.
Oh.
And went to Kurukshetra with Prabhupada. So, I could see, the different projects that he was interested in. And then after Devasiddhan was open, not officially open, but it was made ready for Prabhupada to come there. He came in 76 and we were up in his room in the Fisher Mansion, and he was talking about the Mayapur project in Mayapur. And I had never ever been to Mayapur, but he was describing the Vedic Planetarium and how he wanted to present an alternative to modern scientific accepted theory of Darwin, that life comes from life and everything like that. So he described it in great detail, and then he turned to me and he said, "So what do you think of this idea?" And I said, "Oh, I think it's a very good idea, very nice idea, Srila Prabhupada." And he said, "Oh, good, you like it also, then you can finance." And, of course, I had just kind of finished doing Devasiddhan, so I really wasn't looking for anything else. But it turned out that it took many, many years to develop the proper design and everything that Prabhupada wanted, because it had gone off in many different tangents. So by the time it came ready to build, we were ready to go, and we felt very, very blessed that we were doing the right thing and that Prabhupada would be happy.
Ambarish, I'm a little curious because I've heard you tell this story before, and I'm wondering, when Prabhupada said that, did he kind of, look at you and chuckle and give you some way out, or did he just kind of look at you very sternly, like this is your mission in life? I mean, what happened in those next 10 seconds? I don't know that part of the history.
Yeah, no, I have a photograph of it. I'll send it to you sometime.
Okay, please.
But Prabhupada and I, he was always very jovial with me. So he said it, and then he kind of chuckled, and everybody in the room kind of chuckled. But of course, it was a very serious.
And you kind of went gulp.
Yeah, exactly. But but anyway, the way it turned out was perfect.
Wonderful,
yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay, Svaha, I'm wondering, as the other half, the better half, this principle number 5, again, to erect for the members and society at large. It's interesting that Prabhupada, and for society at large, building temples is not just for us. Sometimes people have a tendency to think you build a temple and it's for me or my family or my community or my religion or my ethnicity. But Prabhupada said for society at large, a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. So this purpose number 5 has become very important for your family. Do you think it should be important for other devotees as well? Or is this just kind of, this is a Ford family project? And how important is it for the rest of us, this number 5?
This number 5 is for every member of our society. I don't think it's but before I answer your question, I have to defend my dear father-in-law, because he was a gentleman, and he had said that, like he said, he was not very happy, but let's say they were just concerned because he had sold Ford stock, which was really very valuable back then. And so he had kind of chided him that, you shouldn't be selling stock to pay for, and he thought he didn't know much, because it was very new. He had only been in the movement a few years, and he was spending all this money. So his father and mother were rightly concerned. But I do have to say that you pointed out to the opening of the Devasandan Mandir, and both of them came with many, I think your brother was there who lived in Detroit, and many other from the family attended that opening. So they were very supportive in that.
And I'm sure they were not only supported, they were very proud.
Very proud, yes.
The Ford family in Detroit so connected, and here they revitalized this beautiful historic home and given it a spiritual purpose. And so many VIPs were there. I'm sure they were very, very proud.
Let me just interject a quick point here. It was that one of the reasons that we put so much into that was the beautiful doll exhibit, and that that was another mission that Srila Prabhupada asked me to become involved in, because he loved what the LA exhibit did. People lined up to see it. So he was convinced this was a wonderful way to preach. And so, that was a big part of the Devasiddhan there.
Yeah, and again, for those that don't know, this Lawrence Fisher was so wealthy, he had boat docks for big boats underneath the house, and they filled those in and built a kind of a seawall kind of a thing, because the house went right into the Detroit River. And that's another story, what they did during the Prohibition days on the river, but we won't have to talk about that right now. But the house had these big, huge boat wells, and they actually converted those into a museum with dioramas. So it was very, very beautiful. So Svaha, tell us then how, should other devotees take this as important in their lives? This building.
Just go back. I keep going back because when he's talking, I think of all these things. They were Southern Mandir because it was a group of tour of famous houses in Detroit. So people would stop there, and as you know, the Detroit Temple dining room is so beautiful, and devotees cook such beautiful opulent prasadam. So whoever was on that tour, they would stop at the temple, take darshan of the deities from the balcony if they didn't want to take their shoes off, and then they had prasadam at the restaurant. So there was very nice preaching going on for quite a number of years, and my husband would know the name of the devotee who was conducting these tours, and it was very successful for many years. So it was a very nice preaching facility, and it still is. It just we have to revive it, Yeah,
it really was an example of a lot of the projects that you both have taken on over the years of using, as Prabhupada taught us, Yukta Vairagya, using everything, including art and history and music. And I know at the Detroit Temple, I haven't been there in some time, but they used to have, concerts, and they would have speaking tours, and people would come in and use the facilities. It was famous. And then they'd stay in this beautiful, beautiful, what was once his dining room became a restaurant. It was beautiful there. I want to go into
weddings there as well.
Weddings as well.
Yeah.
My brother was married at that temple.
Oh, he was. Oh,
he was. I performed the wedding. Was the one I've done maybe 5 in my whole career, but one of them was I married my brother in that temple, and he thought it was great. And so many of his friends came, and they thought it was really cool. We're getting married at Hare Krishna Temple, and it's the Fisher Mansion and all of that. So yeah,
I'm so glad I brought that up, because my husband already elbowed me that you're going off topic, but I'm so glad I mentioned it, because now he found out that it's close to your.
It's all on topic, because we're talking about Prabhupada. We're talking about the two of you as such dedicated servants of Prabhupada, and how it, sometimes devotees tend to think all these things are kind of pie in the sky, and we take away the humanity. In fact, I want to get to that, related to that. Ambarish, some people may think, okay, they're the Fords. He's born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and she's got a PhD in aristocratic Bengali family. And, all these things comes easy for them, and then in America, they say, twiddle our thumbs. What can I do? I'm just going to twiddle my thumbs. It all came easy. Tell us about some of the challenges, because I know there were challenges, there have been challenges. I work with you in Mayapur. There's challenges today to, move things forward. There's always challenges. How have you faced those, and how have you overcome? How have you been so determined since 1974 or 70? That's a long time. Share some of your insight. Where do you get your strength from for all these things?
Well, from Srila Prabhupada, I have complete faith in his instructions and his position. And, it's kept me going. I've had to battle so many different, especially with this TOVP, because it's a big project. It attracts a lot of attention, and a lot of people want to get involved and take some credit here, take some credit there. And so there's been a lot of opposition to, like, the position where the temple is, the design, you name it, But the biggest one that I've ever come across is the one that we're going through right now with this pandemic.
Yes.
It's put the brakes on, our fundraising. And so it's very difficult. Luckily, I have a very, very good man in my poor Brajavilas Prabhu. So he's keeping things going there. But it's been a challenge. But for myself, you know, I think of, you know, the Brajabasis, you know, in Vrindavan, every day there was a demon they had to contend with. So I figure it's a blessing somehow or another. I just have to see it that way.
That's a beautiful insight, that even in the holy city of Vrindavan, still so many challenges, you could say, or demons. You know, certainly we don't see demons in the form that Krishna was clearing them out, but so many challenges come, and they had to face all of those, and with Krishna there and protecting them, but they all had their role to play.
And also, like we were talking yesterday, my wife had to, like, you know, I was missing in action for long periods of time where I had to travel here for a meeting, go here, go there. So she was bringing up 2 kids, and, you know, so I'm happy now that she's directly involved and she can be a part of the design process. She's really enjoying it.
Yeah, what was that like for you, Svaha? I mean, you raised 2 beautiful daughters, now grown up. Now, as I mentioned, you've got a grandson. In the midst of all that, your husband's jumping in an airplane and flying here, there, everywhere. You know, what was that like for you? What were some of those challenges that you had to contend with?
I mean, I took everything in stride because I supported everything that he's done so far. And he's been a real Prabhupada man. You know, he's never shied away from, until we started building this TOVP, he was helping in any way he was asked. You know, he helped in several projects. And I just, this will be funny because he was, of course, he was, you know, even before 2006, there was, you know, SMPDC meetings in England and London, England, and he would be traveling a lot. And a couple of times it so happened that more than a challenge for me, but for him, he came to Detroit, and his mother was passing away, or she had passed away. One time we were coming back.
Yeah.
And then one time his brother passed away, and he was going to the opening of the Fiji temple, and there was like a Category 4 hurricane coming. So
where they live, not me.
as
not in Fiji, in Miami.
He got out of town just in time. Is that what you're telling us?
You know, he's a gentleman, so he said, "Should I cancel?" And every time he'd say that, I would say, "No, of course not." But by that time, I also had my 2 ailing parents with me.
Yeah.
So it was just, you know, everything we've learned. You know, we face, we grow so much from it. You know, and it makes you stronger because then subsequently, when there was the TOVP program in Los Angeles, my mother passed away, and by then the girls had already gone to college, so I was kind of alone. But, you know, there's definitely, I had so much support from the devotees in Alachua. And
my mother and father-in-law both, I mean, they gave $1 million to the TOVP, his hard-earned money, my father-in-law. He was a doctor. So, yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. I wasn't aware of that. Svaha, let me just ask you, you know, some may kind of wonder a little bit. I mean, you know, Krishna makes demands on us, and Prabhupada makes demands, the Guru makes demands, the Shastra makes demands. You know, just a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but a little bit seriously. I mean, what made you just, not just at one point in time with all these issues, you know, there's a hurricane coming and my husband's gallivanting all around. What made you not just say, look, I quit. This is too much trouble. You know, I married this rich guy. He's famous. He's got all this money. Now he's just like spending it all over the world. I mean, well, what kept you from saying, hey, enough already? You know, come on. What?
I only brought these things up because you wanted, you know, to hear about the real, our life, real life on the ground, you know. But
yes, we do.
If you honestly ask me, I feel that we are so blessed and we are blessed by the mercy of countless Vaishnavas, our acharyas, Sri Guru and Nitai Gaur, who are the fathers of the Sankirtan movement, with all the Vaishnavas on the planet and who have left before, and to be engaged in fulfilling this cherished desire of Srila Prabhupada to build the TOVP, which will be like a beacon of light for many, many thousands of years. We cannot imagine what 10,000 years look like, because even going back 1,000 years is a big deal. But to be able to take part in something of such enormity, and so that's why I feel like the traveling that we did for the TOVP all around the world was very gratifying, because we met so many wonderful, sincere souls, so eager to take part, because somehow we were able to convey to them that how special this is, like na bhuto na bhavishyati, like it not in the past has ever something on such a huge scale been attempted, and in our movement, and never again. So we feel especially blessed, and I always feels that service means sacrifice. And how much Srila Prabhupada said he spent gallons and gallons of blood for each one of us. And I'm so eternally grateful to have been picked up from the world of illusion and be saved, in ISKCON. And we can never repay the debt, but the only way I can attempt to serve this by paying it forward, by helping more people come. So the TOVP will be, my younger daughter said, she said, it'll make our mark in the world, because it'll be something so grand. And that's what was Prabhupada was such a visionary. And he knew that in order to attract people of the world, you would have to really give them something very grand and very international in flavor. So because it reflects our community, because we have devotees from all over the world. And this was the prediction of Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur, that devotees from all nationalities wearing kanthi mala and tilak and playing the khol and kartals will chant the holy names, Hare Krishna. So this is very, very, blessed temple that we are taking part alongside everyone. We have no illusion of ever imagining that this is some contribution, from just our family. And I'm very proud to say that my two daughters have, contributed, because like in America, we say, put your money where your mouth is. And I used to engage my daughters in cleaning the temple room, and I remember Amrita used to massage Srila Prabhupada's deity in our Tulsi garden just outside my temple room. And Anisha was still pretty young to, do something like that. So I would kind of only let her clean her own. I had a little altar built for her in my temple room, and she would do that. But the reason I'm saying all this is because she, at that very young age, she said, okay, Amrita is helping you clean the temple room, but I'm going to grow up and build temples like my father.
Oh, is that right?
So we reminded her,
So we should have had her on this show to talk about the importance of purpose number 5, to erect holy places. Great.
I want to just clarify one thing so people don't think that I was gallivanting around to Fiji for a vacation. I went there for a temple opening in Suba.
Yes, of course.
He went to Argentina with Punagrahi Maharaj. This is what I just wanted to say, was that he's always been an ISKCON man. And maybe now I could talk about his Mayapur connection, because we are reminded as we are all listening to Bhakti Charu Swami's lectures and hearing from our wonderful senior Vaishnavas about his glories, that Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj was such a Prabhupada man, and he did so much all around the world to help ISKCON. So the connection that I wanted to bring up is that I found out only from hearing these just recently, that Bhakti Charu Swami was so instrumental in protecting New Mayapur temple. And my husband...
two of them. Yeah.
Yes. So my husband also, when he was approached, he very, very readily, wrote out a check for saving New Mayapur Dham. So we have this new Mayapur connection, and I think Honolulu is known as New Navadip Dham.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
no, again, so just in
nothing.
the context of this principle 5, erecting holy places, people may think, oh, well, you were both so involved with Mayapur, but it's Mayapur, it's New Mayapur, it's Hawaii, it's Detroit, and so many. Fiji, you went to the opening in Fiji. You've encouraged devotees around the world to support temple openings. It's really, no, you two really, you won't want me to say this, but everybody listening now live and later who listen to the recording knows how wonderful and exemplary you two are, really. And I think that's why they wanted you to speak. That's why the GBC SPT program wanted you to speak on this, because you are really, really so exemplary. I want to bring up a little bit something that might be a little challenging, but I think it's important to bring out. We have our 7 purposes, and you two are here speaking about the principle, the purpose number 5, erecting holy places, temples. Somebody might have a question or doubt in their mind, and they might say, well, wait a minute, but this is Kali Yuga, and we're not supposed to build temples. That's a previous age when you emphasize building temples, and we're supposed to chant on the streets and do Sankirtan and Kirtan. So these things aren't so important. I'm sure you've had that question raised before. How would you answer that to someone that maybe isn't so well informed and has that doubt? What would you say to them?
You want me to answer?
Well, let's go to Ambarish and then Svaha. Let's do it that way this time.
Yes, well, I think, obviously both principles are ultimately important. We're still going out in the streets and, distributing books, and that's like the backbone of our movement. But at the same time, you have to create a place where people can come to, and they can see the deity, they can see the way that Vaishnavas live and how we worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and listen to Srimad Bhagavatam classes. And you can't just do that. Like, you can do it under a tree, but not in the winter, obviously. So we need to create a place where people can go and they can have association with devotees and they can listen to the Bhagavatam class. That's how I got into it. And so we can't deprive people of that opportunity. So that's why there's so many temples around the world. And Mayapur is specifically important because that's the place where all the devotees who are working very hard all over the world, that's where they get together and re-energize their batteries and their purpose in life. And they can go back to their zones and they can feel renewed, So Mayapur is very important. And also, as Shivaram Swami said, the mercy in Mayapur from Lord Chaitanya is very easy to access. And all you need to do is go stand in front of the Panchatattva to understand what he's talking about. So, this is all very important.
I can answer that question in a little different way because he already covered this. So, our Srila Prabhupada's vision and idea of temples is very unique because he wanted our temples to run on parallel tracks of Bhagavad Vidhi and Pancharatrika Vidhi. And he explains that the Bhagavad Vidhi is teaching from the Bhagavatam and covers the first 3 principles of our 9 devotional principles of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. And then the deity worship, according to the Pancharatrika Vidhi, is takes care of Archanam, Vandanam, Padasevanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So it's a very well delineated path that Srila Prabhupada chalked out for us. And our temples are, I think, are like embassies, he mentioned. And of course, the temple in Mayapur is the headquarters, world headquarters, Srila Prabhupada so rightly designated. And this will showcase, gorgeous deity worship and chant. I mean, the Hare Krishna chanting will really, that's the home turf of that's where Lord Chaitanya inaugurated chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That's the birthplace. So it has great significance I think in every way that, and the devotees I hear, how many books they distribute. And then with the planetarium, that's a whole new aspect that people who are maybe not so attracted to religious, to religion and have, they will be curious to see what we have to present in terms of our, our tradition, what our tradition says about the creation of this universe, the planets and things.
So it really is integrated, as we're seeing. It's listed as number 5 in Prabhupada's purposes, but it's integrated with everything else. It's part of the systematic propagating of spiritual knowledge. It's certainly part of propagating consciousness of Krishna and promoting the Sankirtan movement. As you said, I mean, where's there a bigger room in the whole world? You said similar to this. Where's the bigger room in the whole world for people to come together and chant? And that's what's going to be going on there. So
right, and also covers, Srila Rupa Goswami, out of all the 64 principles of devotional service, named the 5 most potent ones, and Nam Sankirtan on the top with deity worship, Sadhu Sangha, and what were the other 2?
And it can all happen there in my
and it happens, and the deity service worship is already on a very high, beautiful scale. I mean, they celebrate festivals that are, we follow them online. They are so gorgeous, and so it sets a precedent for other temples. And also, we noticed that since Srila Prabhupada built the Krishna Balaram Mandir and the temples, even, the temples in India, they have inspired and really brought other temples up to speed in their deity worship. And so it's, he's saying, stop talking.
No, these are all valid points. Well, because I'm sure the 2 of you talk about these things all the time, but for the rest of us, these are new to really hear the insights of both of you. So you're both so humble, you don't want to talk, you don't want to be in the center, you don't think but I mean, it's inspiring for all of us. It truly is. And Ambarish, I want to ask a question, but right along the lines of this question of inspiration. You told us your story a few minutes ago. Prabhupada directly looked at you, said, what do you think of Mayapur? Okay, I'd like you to fund it. You got a direct instructions from Prabhupada. So as a senior devotee, many people of us won't get a direct instruction, certainly from Prabhupada, or maybe even from, in the next generations of Diksha Gurus, maybe not so much direct instructions. Nobody outside of his Vani form in the future is going to get a direct instruction from our founder Acharya. So what do you say to those of us that didn't get the direct instruction? You heard it in the room with all the witnesses, and there it was, boom, here's my life's mission. Shed some light on what the rest of us should do. How do we draw inspiration and the way you have?
Well, you know that there's those many levels of intelligence. A very intelligent person, you can just tell him once and he knows what to do. And the person that's like a 3rd-class intelligence, even after you tell him 10 times, he doesn't do it right. I think that, Srila Prabhupada had to directly tell me what he wanted me to do, because I wouldn't have picked it up from his books or anything. So, but he did talk about the TOVP very much in his last months on this planet. And so, I was happy to get that direct instruction. And, I had the willingness and the facility to be able to follow that through. But I think that anybody who didn't get a direct instruction from Srila Prabhupada, there's so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples that are still around. And there's Srila Prabhupada's books. And just by reading his books, you know what to do. I mean, before I was initiated, I was living in Jackson Hole, which is one of the most beautiful places. And, it's in the mountains of Wyoming. And I was chanting and I was cooking I had some deities there. And it was very peaceful and wonderful. But I kept reading in the books, you have to associate with devotees. You have to associate with devotees. So I packed up and I left there and I moved back to Detroit. So, clear. We have the books, we have the tapes, we have Association of Prabhupada's Disciples. Everything is there. And it will be passed on to the next generation. So there's plenty to do. There's not going to be, a dearth of activities going on in ISKCON so that people will be unoccupied. There's plenty to do in our society. So I was just fortunate and foolish enough that I needed to be told directly by the founder Acharya, you do this. And of course it took like 40 years for it to sink in. There's a lot of layers up there. So
let's looking into the future. We talked about how Prabhupada's impact on you in the past and how it's affected you today and everything you've been doing your whole life, and how we're all blessed to see the TOVP and the impact it's going to have. In this context of today being the anniversary of ISKCON's founding and this whole range of purposes, looking forward, maybe ask Svaha first. We're all getting older. Even the youngest among us, we're getting older. And the older of us, seems more quickly older. We just lost the physical presence of His Holiness Bhakti Maharaj. You're a grandmother now. You're certainly thinking about the future, what's going to happen with your grown-up kids and your grandson. What kind of ISKCON would you like to see there be? I mean, what kind of the bigger picture? What are some of the things you really feel we need to continue? Anything you feel we need to change? Things that we need to lift up more to make ISKCON stronger going into the future and having the kind of positive impact that we want ISKCON and the TOVP to have? What are your thoughts on that?
Let me just back up a little bit, just because it's such a historic day that just in a recent lecture, Srila Prabhupada was talking about the humble beginnings of our movement. And he said it started with just he was saying, I was chanting in the Tompkins Square Park from 2 to 5 in the afternoons with the little drum, and Achyutananda Swami and Brahmananda Swami were the first ones to join him. And then, so I feel that, the people, all the devotees, those who helped Srila Prabhupada to bring ISKCON up to this point, are so deserving of our, so much accolade and praise, because they really took up the challenge and it was made easy for us who came later. So we owe them a huge debt of gratitude, along with Srila Prabhupada, for taking up the challenge.
Well, building on that, then let's say, okay, it's a very important point. We've all benefited so much from those that have come before us. What would you like to see in the generations to come? What would you like to see them do, and how can they build on the work of Prabhupada and the earlier generations and of your generation? What would you like to see them do to keep things going nicely?
I think they could just expand on all the things that are going on now. The leaders today are so brilliant in thinking in new ways of reaching to people, so much outreach, and prison ministries, and there's so much outreach in so many different ways. And I think we could, because of the pandemic, I think the farm communities could make a comeback, which will be very appealing to people. And there will always be like an intellectual class, and for them, Srila Prabhupada's books will be, there to study and, really, because Prabhupada said even one verse of Bhagavatam, you can spend months discussing. So there's so much Prabhupada gave us in such a short time. And the leaders today have done so much more to expand. And if we, in the future generations, could just expand along those lines. And I have no doubt, because some of the younger generations that sometimes we listen to, and they are so amazing, the way they study Shastra, the way they preach, the way they, they lead their lives, it's so inspiring. So I don't think we'll ever run out of, inspiration and talent, but I do feel the urgency of, this TOV, the pandemic has kind of thrown a curveball, because we were really had such a momentum. You noticed when the Pujari floor opening that
it was beautiful.
Things were going, there was construction going on late into the night. And now with the pandemic, everything slowed down and stopped. So I feel we have such an obligation that to all the leaders who are, like you said, aging population of ISKCON, that we need to complete it in a timely fashion. And for that very reason, we need everyone to really cooperate, because that was always the underlying message. And Krishna, with one thing, he achieved so many goals. So I feel Prabhupada gave us the TOVP because we could really bring the larger Gauriya Vaishnav Sampradaya and even our ISKCON, which has become splintered in some ways, together and cooperate and build this wonderful temple.
It brings us back to the early point that Ambarish Prabhu mentioned, that Prabhupada gave us these 7 purposes, their principles, their purposes, their mission, and we all can look, that's the way you have both found something in their direct instructions from Prabhupada or from his books or from other Vaishnavas, taking that to heart and making our own contributions. So I'm hearing you're saying to this next generations, pick it up, move it forward, expand it in your own way. We've got just a couple minutes left. Ambarish, can you real briefly, some questions are coming up in the chats. The deadline certainly has been adjusted. What are the plans moving forward with the TOVP, and how can devotees around the world help to make sure things move forward to please Prabhupada, as we all know we want to do together?
Well, they can log on to the website, tovp.org, and they can contribute. That's always very helpful, and the fundraising has been going on even during the pandemic. So there is work that's going on, and even though, we have to jump through so many hoops, as far as the government and everything. So we're pushing forward as best we can. And I just wanted to add on to what Svaha was saying, that, if, I was going to live another 100 years or so, I think it's very important, especially this pandemic has brought it to the forefront, that we need these rural communities. And somebody just chimed in on that. And Prabhupada wanted us to develop a simpler way of living. And that may seem comical coming from, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, who completely set this whole industrial way of living in motion. But it's gone full circle, and we have to get back to a more natural way of living. So that's where I would put my attention. Yes.
And a very appropriate way to conclude the discussion on Purpose 5, because Purpose number 6 is to bring the members together, teaching a more simple and natural way of life. So
Yes.
stay tuned for that, all of you who are listening. So we've run out of time. I really want to thank both Ambarish and Svaha. It's wonderful. Express gratitude on behalf of the entire ISKCON movement, really your leadership, your personal exemplary devotion to Prabhupada, your generosity, the sacrifices you made for Mayapur and other projects. It's very inspiring for all of us. And for devotees that are listening to this live or who tune in later, please, there's the information, TOVP.org. Please tune in, get involved. If you can, send some contribution to make it happen. At the very least, we all can pray that things move forward for complete success. And again, Ambarish and Svaha, thank you very, very, very much.
Jai
Thank
Prabhu,
you,
thank
Prabhu.
you so much.
Thank you for
Hare Krishna.
allowing us this opportunity to really appreciate how service is such a divine privilege. And we are so very eternally grateful to everyone for engaging us in this seva.
Thank you.
Glorify our parampara and Srila Prabhupada ki
Thank
jai.
you both very, very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada, ISKCON ki jai. ISKCON Foundation.
Prabhupada ISKCON ki jai.
Purposes ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Jai.
He provided the